Our next development on circuits are something called Ohm's law and how they apply to so-called resistor circuits, which sounds like something cool out of Fighting the Empire in Star Wars, but isn't quite that. Recall the connection between the current I in a material and the voltage difference across it. I is delta V over R. This is often, and incorrectly, said to be Ohm's law. The ohm in this refers to a man named George Ohm, whose papers in 1827 were important in establishing circuits. This equation isn't a law, it's the definition of resistance. What Ohm's law actually says is that R is a constant. Not only that, but this isn't really a law in the way that we like to talk about laws in physics, because it's not even always true, certainly not for all materials. A material that does obey Ohm's law is said to be ohmic, and if it doesn't, it's said to be non-ohmic. Most metals are ohmic, most organic materials are not. But the basic thing here is Ohm's law says for certain classes of materials, the resistance is a constant. For an ohmic material, the current voltage plot would be linear, and the resistance would be 1 over the slope. Right. Nothing big here, but it is saying that you can, for ohmic materials, you can say that the current plot is basically linear. Real materials will probably fuzz out at different places, depending on the material, but it's a good approximation, and again, because most metals and other good conductors tend to be ohmic, this is not a bad thing to have. Two important examples of non-ohmic circuit elements are batteries and capacitors. The EMF of a battery comes from the chemical reactions that are going on and doesn't depend on what the current is that's being drawn. And the voltage across a capacitor does depend on current, but in a complex way, which we will not really talk about till later. You really have to have the idea of magnetism before you can really understand capacitance, or at least you have to go a little further than we're going right now, but we will come back to it. One important type of circuit element is the resistor. A resistor is designed to control the current in a circuit because it inputs resistance into the circuit. They also have other uses. There's a certain negative connotation to that word, but in fact they're really useful. Resistors are used for things like heating elements. All right, so in your toaster oven to make your bagel nice and toasty, we pump a lot of current through, and there's high resistance, and therefore we get the wire gets hot and glows. You can use resistors to control the circuit. You can use resistors as sensors because many things, the resistance is, well, as we said last time, often exquisitely related to material properties. And so by changing the material properties, we can measure the current across the resistor and figure out what's going on. And of course, computational elements, because inside every computer is, a wafer that has millions or maybe even billions of tiny little resistors in them, so-called transistors. But the resistance is an important part of that. So let's think about this. A toaster is initially cool. After bread is put in it, Alice depresses the lever and turns on the toaster. What can be said of the current in the resistors that make up the heating element? The options here are that the current jumps up to a low value and then remains steady, or that the current, so something like ba, or jumps up to a high value and stays steady, or jumps up to a low value and then increases, or jumps up to some high value but then decreases. And what ends up happening is, as soon as we connect the circuit, the current jumps to some high value, but then as the elements get hotter, which they're supposed to because they're toasters, their resistance will increase because resistivity increases with temperature and we're not changing any other dimension. And as the resistivity increases, the resistor increases, the voltage stays the same. It's being controlled by the line, and so by from the power plant. And so we have a V over an increasing R, so we get decreasing current. This is the anatomy of a light bulb. The way a light bulb works is that there's a very thin wire called the filament. It's connected to other wires. Those connecting wires connect to metal shells. That's what makes it very easy to put a bulb in or take it out. You don't have to tie up any wires. The original light bulbs, you actually did have to basically rewire them. but it only became practical when someone realized that you could use this two-shell method with an insulator between them to make sure you don't get a short. The glass bulb is generally filled with an inert gas so that it won't, the heat doesn't cause it to oxidize, which is bad. And then, no, I guess that's the whole bulb. The resistance of a bulb is around 3 ohms, while the resistance of the wires is around maybe 0.01 ohms. So we can generally neglect the wires and pretend they have zero resistance. This is what we call the ideal wire model, where we assume that the resistance of wires are zero. It's obvious an approximation, but it's a useful one. It's a lot like saying when something's frictionless. We know it's not really true, but it can be very useful, and we can approximate it just by working harder and harder. This is part of what is called a lumped circuit model, where we assume that each element type has its own specific property and that no other element types share that property. So all the resistance in a circuit is in the resistors, and all the capacitance are in a capacitor, and all the EMF comes from battery, but the battery doesn't have any resistance, and so on. This is a useful model, and it's generally pretty easy because wires tend to have such ridiculously low resistances that we can basically neglect them. But we'll talk a little bit later when we do electromagnetism that once we have varying voltages, then it becomes trickier to use that, and we might not be able to. The ideal wire model does lead to the bizarre statement that the potential difference across the wire is zero. Since there's no resistance, the charge just flows. It doesn't lose any energy. This is obviously physically not possible, but the drop can usually be taken to be negligible, and so we get away with it. Although this does lead to why you have to be careful, because if you just have wires that are connected to voltage sources without running through resistors, then you're going to get huge currents because the resistance is essentially zero. Using this model, the voltage behaves here as shown here, that we have the wire is connected to a battery which has some voltage, and then it doesn't lose any voltage as it goes along until we hit the resistor, where then it drops. And then once it gets done with that, it comes out, and again the wire loses nothing. Now, does it have to drop to zero? No, it depends on what the input voltage was, but it definitely has this large voltage drop across here. The electric field, this looks a lot like the capacitor fields we talked about, and the electric field is similar. It's the voltage drop across the wire divided by the length of the resistor. Sorry, voltage drop across the resistor divided by the length of the resistor. And of course, it points from high potential to low potential in the direction the current is flowing. This looks a lot like the results from a capacitor, and will often steal some of those results. So, what current in amps flows through a circuit consisting of a battery with EMF 24 volts connected to a resistor of 40 volts? And of course, this is just apply Ohm's law, and we get 0.6.